248 Union Square East, aka 100-102 East 17th Street, Tammany Hall, an individual landmark. This is docket number 163899, Manhattan Block 872, Lot 78. A neo-Georgian style building designed by Thompson Homes and Converse and Charles B. Myers, built in 1928-29. Application is to construct a rooftop addition, install new storefront infill, signage, and window openings. This was last presented November 18th, 2014.
Good morning, Commissioners. Timothy Shaw, Preservation Staff. 44 Union Square East is an individual landmark located at the southeast corner of Union Square East and East 17th Street. The application was initially presented at the November 24th, 2014 public hearing, and its primary view from Union Square Park can be seen here. The proposal at that time was for the removal of an existing hip slate roof and its replacement with a new metal and glass rooftop addition, the installation of new storefront infill at the ground floor on both facades, the installation of new signage, including lettering of the storefront transom and sign fans above the ground floor, a bracket sign, and the replacement of 4 flagpoles at their existing locations, the installation of 2 new entrances at existing window openings along East 17th Street, the installation of a new entrance marquee at one of the new entrances, and the removal of 3 decorative stone panels at the 3rd floor, see here, on the East 17th Street facade, and their replacement with new 12/12 double-hung windows. At the hearing, the Commissioners had concerns regarding the demolition of the slate roof and the overall size and design of the rooftop addition. In response, the proposed addition has been modified with a new terracotta sunshade at the base to recall the slate roof and with a redesigned dome above. Additionally, while the Commissioners did not discuss this issue at the public hearing, the applicant has also modified the proposed 17th Street facade and is now proposing to reinstall 2 of the decorative stone panels in between the new window openings. Harry Kendall of BKSK Architects will present the revised proposal in further detail.
All right, we'll reopen the hearing.
Hello, Commissioners. I'm Harry Kendall from BKSK Architects. I'm here with Todd Poisson and Elise Quaisbart, who we've worked closely on this, and you were very much welcome questions. Margaret Cotter, representative of the client, or of our client. She is our client. And we're very pleased to be back before you. We were before you about 3 months ago, as Tim said, and we were proposing an overall restoration of the lower 3 floors and the existing partial 4th floor transformed and 2 successively smaller partial floors under a contemporary arch dome configuration. The ensuing discussion was spirited and we felt very productive. We drew the following conclusion. Existing building, we felt, and there is some sentiment for this, can accommodate an upward expansion. This corner of Union Square begs for enhancement, one commissioner said. But what we propose should be much quieter and more deferential. The hip roof of the building was understood so at the same time, it's not the essence of the building, as another commissioner said. And overall, incorporating new modern elements in a designated structure such as this, one that is as much a cultural as an architectural landmark, is something that can and should be done in New York City. So those are some of our takeaways. So we're here today with a revised proposal that Timothy mentioned. It has a hip roof element of terracotta, and it has a much smaller dome. We'll go into a lot more detail, of course, but so basically, in summary, we were encouraged to better honor the existing building, explore a scheme that integrated a potentially ambitious rooftop element more gracefully into the composition. We heard you loud and clear. Brief digression. This is a reminder that the northern portion of Union Square is extraordinary, remarkable. We call it a zone of quality. We're pleased to be participating in the resurgence of this northeast corner. Also, it's an interesting fact that the 1928 Tammany Hall building replaced a much taller earlier building. So our sense that this corner can accommodate a bit of height is not just conjectural, but affirmed by some historic images. Another reminder that the existing building, whereas it's largely intact, the public's perception of it is much diminished by its current state. Obviously, that's a big part of addressing this building. Note the presence of the slate roof from this vantage point. It is quite secondary, but we've come to feel we've embraced it as a compositional element. Much of the building's, the greatest removal of original fabric from the building up until now has been in the storefronts on Union Square. On East 17th Street, there is smaller scale but still pervasive sense of combination of decay, as in the parapets as shown here, of random signage, and of changes to the windows and other aspects of the fenestration. So I note that these plaques that Timothy mentioned, these are the 3 identical plaques on the eastern edge that we are replacing with windows, but we're retaining them and reworking them into the facade. We'll see how. Just looking at it in clear elevation terms, this is the existing additions. We didn't dwell on the height of the actual height of the existing slate roof, and you see sizable utilitarian elements rising above, which the roof is there in large part to screen these elements from view, and it is, but in most other regards, it's stagecraft. It's a roof that has very little occupied space behind it, and again, I don't mean to dote on it too much, but it's insubstantial and it's secondary. This is the slate, sort of interestingly, is weathered severely where there's no conditioned space behind it, less weathering where there is an apartment behind it. I suppose that's not surprising, but we are proposing to remove this material and replace it with a masonry series of sunshades. We see the historic material as secondary. We see the hip shape as an important composition element. We'll show you how and why. So back to the original, just a reminder of the full size of the screen, what we see when we're as close on Union Square as we can get when we're on the other side of Union Square east. So the new proposal seen from that same vantage point. We'll get into a good bit of detail about the storefronts later in the presentation. But, and a very small note, there are flagpoles that exist. We are cleaning up the attachments and hoping to retain them. Very small note. The more important thing is, let's keep our eyes trained on the roof, the why and the how. So here you see these sunshade elements, and this is a detail. We will show you more detail, but right now, so you know what you're looking at, they are these terracotta pieces held out over a glass slope that provides enclosure for the floor. The floor level of our new 4th floor is several feet lower than the existing roof. So it's very important for us to be able to introduce light, not just from above, which we do to some degree, but also from the perimeter. It makes the space occupiable and leasable, etc. So the sunshades are in the precise location. They are the same slope, the same height as the existing slate, and the glass is suppressed behind it. So now, just as a reference, I'll do this only a couple more times during the presentation. The previous proposal and the current proposal from the same vantage point. Now we're moving back, and this is the slide we introduced the project with, but here the dome begins to become visible as you move back 30 feet or so from the edge of the sidewalk. The slate roof also becomes more visible, and here you see that we are doing a set of terracotta tiles that are, they make a complete corner with spaces between, but they become more intermittent in the middle of the building. So what you see is the presence of masonry, the evocation of the historic shape, and the top coping. And you also see the structure more subtly behind. And that awareness of the structure and the glass, we feel integrate as the dome rises from it, that you are prepared for the integration of old and new. This is both an entirely new element and an old element, sort of both and. So that the upper part is unabashedly new, the lower part is unabashedly old, and the hip roof is the gray area in between, literally gray. So here we move well back past the midpoint of Union Square, and we see the dome has taken on a nearly hemispherical shape. That's all I need to say right now. And then a reference that to compare what we showed before, which was more overtly organic and less classical in conception, and this dome. Now we're all the way back as far as you can get while you're in the axial view with your back virtually against the wall of Union Square West, and the dome is fully contained within the footprint of the hip, yet we think integrated as dual forms, one rises from the other, and it's almost purely hemispherical, not quite. Now, a digression. There's an important one. We have found an interesting history. We talked about this before, that you would be unaware if you weren't working this design carefully, of Georgian-style buildings that in the course of their life and evolution acquired domes. So it's a fascinating topic. I'd love to write a book on it and find much more. But from Jefferson's Monticello, which he designed originally and built, and then after his sojourn in Europe, growing more conversant with the language of classicism, redid to incorporate this dome. Slightly later, but almost contemporary, the Devonshire Hospital was built as a stable when expanded with this doorway and pediment, and when expanded to become a hospital, this glorious dome and pair of cupolas were added to it in not a seamless composition, but a fascinating one. Closer to our time, two projects by Foster and Partners at the Smithsonian. This inner court is not visible from the exterior, but the interior shows the resonance of the contemporary and historic in conjunction. The Reichstag, also of course by Lord Norman Foster, is heavy with symbolic content and with beauty. It's a composition of modern and historic. It reflects cataclysmic historical events, and it carries this message of transparency in government that we find alluring. Of course, it's very strong architecture. As an experience from the inside, it's quite transformative. So we're a lot humbler, but we like to believe that we're ambitious and proposing very exciting architecture. And so we have a visible dome, we have the in-between element, and that diagrid that structures both of these things here seen on the interior. Now, what is our symbolic content? Because we came to you before with a strong emphasis on symbolic content, and that we have revised the design substantially. We feel and are thankful for the time to integrate it better into the existing structure. But we have guarded the symbolic content carefully, and we think it's important. First, the history of Tammany Hall. Tammany Hall, the predecessor to the current headquarters, rose well above its context. It contained a domed hall, which is very important in the political functioning of Tammany Hall, and it was fronted by this arched tenement that contained a larger-than-life-size statue of the Native American figure, Chief Lenape gentleman named Chief Tamanend. Chief Tamanend was the namesake of the Tammany societies which proliferated across the nation, of which Tammany Hall was the last surviving member of that club. Chief Tamanend was a peacemaker. The reason he became his namesake was he represented an ethos of a voice for all. Here he's seen signing a treaty with William Penn. This is a plaque on the current Tammany Hall building depicting him. He's often shown astride a turtle. He was the leader of the Turtle Clan. The turtle was the Lenape creation myth where it rose out of the sea, creating land. That land was also known by the Lenape as Turtle Island, our country. And it was occupied by them for 12,000 years before the colonists came from Europe. So there's a backstory of great interest, and it's encoded in the name Tammany Hall. Now, the storefront on Union Square, which many of us think is the principal facade, and in most public ways is, was a commercial storefront, the entrance to manufacturers Hanover Trust. The front door of Tammany Hall was these doors, and the arched pediment above it, sort of an outlier, unlike anything else on this building now, unexplainable to me when we first began to address the building, is a direct reference to the pediment over the predecessor building and that contained Chief Tamanend. So the myth has been lost, the connection of Tammany Hall with a voice for all ethos has been substantially lost, but the chain is not entirely broken. It exists, and we feel that there's an opportunity to tell a hidden history through a design that is sort of is ambiguous or it reveals unexpected depth. For example, as we've shown, viewed axially, it is essentially classical in its origin, although it uses a modern material. Viewed obliquely, it becomes something else. It is a bit more organic. It is purposefully unconventional, purposefully linking itself to this outlier pediment so that the two forms merge and the message is encoded. It's a quiet message. It's not something that anyone walking by the street would say, oh, it's at Turtle Island, though we would love that to become somewhat better known as people question the reasons behind the architecture. So again, a reference, this is what we proposed before, this is what we're proposing now. And I don't know if it's showing as clearly as it did in our copies. You can reference your sheet, but it's the dome deforms and a sort of eyebrow comes up and almost kisses the parapet as a means of joining the modern and the old. So seen from Park Avenue South, looking to the south, the hip roof rises above the parapet when you get far enough away from it north to see it, and the dome begins to transform. It's preparing you for its relationship to the Tammany front door. So, and here it is, we're looking on East 17th Street looking west. You see that the existing side wall of the building is left untouched. There's a very smidge of utilitarian structure that rises above it, but almost none. You see the dome and you see its eyebrow relating to that parapet. This is also an opportunity. This sheet, you see the existing plaques. The tree got in the way, but we took it out of the photo, and we're proposing to reinstall the plaques between the windows. There's a third one that's broken that we will repair and put in the lobby, but we treasure these plaques as we do the decorative motifs in the building. So, on 17th Street still, but at the far other end, when you get past Union Square and go further down, this is the last point where you can see the whole Tammany Hall structure before it becomes progressively obscured, and you see the dome is more of a classical form, but from any oblique angle it begins to hint at its special character. From the park, where you rise up almost a full story, you're looking at the building from well above the street, from roughly the middle of Union Square Park. You see that that's the existing building. This is our reworked hip, and you see the dome beginning to rise up. It's very subtle. I promised more details on how this sunshade material works. We're doing a lot of terracotta work. We're loving the use of terracotta. We're working with Shaw's to develop tones that are similar to the existing slate, and we're working with a degree of glossiness, the firing of the edge to lend some modeling to the masonry, and the degree of darkness. We expect it to be a variegated material, as any masonry is in real life. And we, as I said before, the corner is held, then random openings begin to open up in order to get light into the interior, but also to presage, to understand what's coming from within and becomes the dome. The structure on the dome itself is very delicate. That's the outside, and those are both sunshades and things you hook yourself to for glass washing. And inside, the structure is larger and more apparent, and it has the appearance of a coffered ceiling from the inside. So, lit at night, it's an important public face to Union Square, and we've said that this building could use a little more panache and a little more height. We're working with a lighting designer to do LED lighting with significant architectural features, and sign bands for the retail stores, but in place of where it used to say manufacturers, Hanover Trust. Below, we'll look at more details of this, but where these are new retail vitrines, quietly lit from within to display goods, but they're in the place, the size and shape and heft, sort of the masonry piers that are lost. And now, it's new above, it's carefully restored within the body, and retail demands are such that we felt intrigued with and compelled to replace the material that was lost with a bit of a modern interpretation. It's not just because of retail needs, but also because you hinted what's happening above, and then you make it come true up above. So we're proposing bronze trim for the openings. We're proposing a reintroduction of the transom band, which existed in the former building, but in a somewhat more elegant or attenuated form. And we are not putting back fan lights, which actually I consider the absolute weakest point of design in the historic building. And the piers that are lost were in part used to hold signage, and so there's a bit of a foot in the door for making them retail display. That more modern interpretation, you're seeing in elevation where you see the piers replacing. The granite of the base has been lost. We're putting it back. We are not reestablishing in this proposal a bulkhead higher. We're bringing the windows down to the granite base. Sign bands over the entrance doors, of which there will be 3. Going around the side, here you can reference the full elevation of 17th Street. These are now multi-pane windows. They are existing historic. We're proposing, but yet there was a congruity between the front and the side before, or the Union Square side and the 17th Street side. We're proposing to continue the bronze frames with the transom band in these windows. The fan lights all remain, except for this one. This is created new. These are all new doors. The doors that are there are existing but not historic, and we're continuing the more modern language of substantially glazed doors. This is a window now, but clearly shown in the contained within the arch. We're turning it into a door. It's important for us, and this is a window that we continue this motif. It's a multi-pane window that we're replacing. This is the window too that we're turning into a pair of doors, recreating a 6/6 transom, which exists here, and we're retaining a historic piece. And these doors, which are not original, are replaced with they're a utilitarian door. They're a service entrance, and they are meant to be glazed like the rest. So we are proposing a projecting canopy in this what used to be a window, but the The entrance to Tammany Hall was always off-center from these arches, which are egress doors for the theater originally. They will now be egress doors for the store, but they're not intended as the main entrance. We've seen actually a group of design drawings of the architects, and that there was an enormous amount of variation in their designs in this center 5 arches. Sometimes these ones were square, and these were the only 2 arched pieces. It showed to us that they were tinkering with it to the last minute, and we felt somewhat liberated to tinker with it a little bit. Lastly, well, more of what I've just talked about. And these are renderings of the existing addition and the proposed storefront. Now on the side, the center, and the proposed restored storefronts, but with more modern doors, recessed, and the projecting canopy. And lastly, the window that I said was being replaced in the 5th arch, the window that's being turned into doors to mimic this opening in this section, and blade signs that we proposed on the front. This was all presented in some detail at the last hearing, not discussed much, but it has been extensively discussed with staff. So lastly, the image of the overall proposal, and we welcome your questions.
All right, questions for the applicant? Michael and then
Once he finished, the only thing that's going to be available for the,
Not at all. I didn't.
that looks more like terracotta than slate.
This is the color that we're liking. This is the finish that we're liking. It's an art with Shaw's.
Adi?
What a great presentation. Tremendous work that you've done. I really applaud the revisions and the thoughtfulness. I have one quick question, and that's about the piers on the Union Square side that you're calling the display piers. What are they made of?
Tom,
Yeah.
why don't you describe the detail? Powder-coated metal.
So in other words, there's no masonry behind them? Or
Go to the view, a few more pages.
Well, the view of-
The perspective rendering. Down below, keep going. No, you go backwards.
Okay.
To look at them obliquely, kind of explains it a little better.
There's no remaining masonry. They're just glass now. So they were totally torn out.
In the 1950s, the storefront was removed entirely. So to reestablish the historic rhythm of the stone piers, we have a series of these deep powder-coated metal vitrines that are goods would be set in here, but they're deep enough to be read from the side as pier-like elements, but they have a solid back of metal.
All right, other questions? Yes, Roberta?
The 117th Street side is used for what now? I mean, what will it be used for? So the main elevation is still that elevation, or is the elevation facing Union Square,
Right.
and the other,
Which was and will be, again, a commercial entrance. Which was, is now, and will remain entrance to the ground floor commercial. That ground floor commercial comes around here and behind all of these, and then this is the entrance to the upper floors of the building. And this is the service entrance and or maybe service entrance and an egress path that sneaks around.
so the main entrance to, what is it? These are apartments up above, right?
No,
They're
sorry,
offices.
they're offices.
Commercial.
It's-
So that's the main entrance to the offices.
Right, and it is very much in play. The market will, to some degree, determine how these upper floors are used. There may well be on Union Square a desire for a retail tenant that is more than one floor. Our client is perfectly interested in accommodating that. Possibly even the 3rd floor, less likely. At some point, it becomes offices, and the roof becomes a very distinctive office space. It also could be a gallery or a fashion house or something, but this is designed speculatively, honestly, but to be honoring the architecture and honoring the extraordinary location of Union Square, and hopefully with extraordinary tenants.
And what's under the roof, the new
that's the entrance that Harry just was talking about, and what you were asking. The one with the small marquee proposed marks the entrance to the upper floors, with 4, 5, and 6.
So is that one space?
So Todd, step
This
forward
is-
to your.
Okay, okay. This is one space. This is a view from the 4th floor, looking east or back from the square. You're back towards Union Square, looking up toward a diminishing 5th and 6th floor within one grand space.
So this blank wall is entirely behind this parapet. At this point, the hipped roof begins to climb up, and that's why we're saying there's a very strong imperative for us to allow light from that perimeter. Because otherwise, if it were slate, it would be that high flat and that high
Solid.
another opaque surface. And then the dome would begin to rise above that.
So the slate is white on the inside and those colors that you have there on the outside? Or are we looking at the slate here, or?
No, you're looking at the inside structure, the grid structure, the three-function grid structure that's self-supporting and needs to come down in that same form. We go to the section of detail that shows this is the white frame that you see in the interior perspective. The glass enclosure lies on top of that structural glaze, and then outriggers help hold the sunshade made of pieces of terracotta that block sun, but the surface of the terracotta is at the red line is where the slate is today.
So, and these lines are continuous, these lines are intermittent, so that they function as essentially windows to the outside, looking through the interesting structure.
One last thing, is there a section showing where the dome connects to the slate roof? Okay.
Yeah, there's a building section in the appendix.
It's page 53 has.
It's 53. Pages are down there.
Yeah.
So it nestles just as the slate roof nestles in behind. This is cut through the pediment. So that's the highest point of the pediment. The balustrade is lower, but currently the slate roof tucks itself down all the way down to that level. So that is exactly where the hipped slate roof is today.
All right, are there other questions? Okay, thank you. I just want to note for the record, we received a letter from New York Union Square, that supports the renovation of Tammany Hall, and the hall is across the street from the hotel, and the proposed renovation would also enhance the overall experience of our guests, as currently the majority of our rooms look over the hall. All right, we can move to discussion. I think that the changes that the applicant has made to, I think, a very large degree, respond to concerns or comments during the public hearing process. And I just want to talk a little bit about the idea of having an enlargement here, given that this is an individual designation. I think, if I remember correctly, I think the applicants went through a fairly detailed set a narrative, so to speak, as to why an enlargement that's visible on an individual landmark may be appropriate. And they talked about this particular classical form. They talked about the fact that you have different forms that come from the same period, which have enlargements or portions above the pediment. That the idea of seeing something above this building would not detract from its architectural form and typology. They also talked about the fact that this building, as an individual designation, has different aspects to it that was considered by the commission. So one is the architecture itself, but also the fact that this is a particular icon from a cultural standpoint as well, that it's Tammany Hall, and that the designation recalls that as well as a very important part of its designation. And therefore, the fact that one is enlarging the individual designation doesn't necessarily take away from the cultural aspect of this building. They went on to talk about the narrative and the symbolism behind the form itself that was going to come on top, and recalling the fact that it's representative of a tortoise, as that in fact that has a relationship to Native American history, that the club itself drew from that mythology, and that was being represented in a symbolic and interpretive way in this building. So those are some of the arguments that were put forward. So I think the Commission needs to think about that in its first threshold about having an enlargement that is visible. I think there's no doubt that this is a form that is going to be seen. We're not pretending to hide it or even make it minimally visible. It is going to appear. I know I made a comment last time, which I don't mind reiterating again, that I think that just from a planning and urban design perspective, I think that this location is very significant given that it's the corner of Union Square, and I think that was a very persuasive argument about looking at the north of Union Square as an area that has very distinctive buildings. Several of them are individual designations, including on the north side. I think for me personally, and I've been to Union Square thousands of times, like most of you, that oddly enough, this building, you miss it. I think you really do go there, you see it within the park with the wonderful green grocers, which I know is a very attractive thing unto itself, but you walk around the street and you don't see this building in a way that really marks both what it is or marks the corner. So there are many things about this proposal that I think would do amazing things for this building, which is, first of all, to call attention to itself as this is Tammany Hall, and we're going to see it. It's at the corner of Union Square and is an important part of New York's incredibly complex and rich history. So I think the restoration piece of this, which theoretically, yes, could be done even without the enlargement, still speaks volumes to I think, really satisfying a very significant preservation purpose. I think that the idea of having enlargement, at least in my mind, I was fairly persuaded by the fact that that would be appropriate given this classical form. And I appreciate that they have taken cues from some of the commissioner's comments regarding retaining that slate roof and the hipped form. I know that while the report may have talked about it in a particular way, commissioners recognize that this is something that you can see, and it's not as diminutive or it's not as hidden as perhaps the report may have noted. And so that is a part of the architecture of the building, and it should not be ignored. And I think that they have done or approached that in a very interesting way, where they're allowing for light and air, but they still are recalling the shape and form. And I think the dome and the glass sphere, which I know I responded last time with, I wouldn't say aghast, but I think with some level of significant reservation about its shape and form and its relationship to the building, I think has definitely moved in very much the right direction in creating a much more quieter form, a much more classical form. So I think that these changes in mind go very much towards meeting the findings of appropriateness. So other comments? Adi, do you want to comment? Not as yet? Okay. Yes.
Oh, I think, I agree with what you said. I also think that the presentation today is of a top piece that I think is more appropriate. It's not so much in your face, and yet I think it retains what the architect liked about the other one, which is that it has that dome feature. boxes. And I guess I have a question about, are they reproducing some of the columns that used to be there, or the piers that used to be there, but, and there's others? These are places, those big sign boxes, right, are now in places where
There were stone piers.
there were piers, and you redid some piers, right? Or you didn't do any piers?
There's no proposed stone piers,
Right.
but each vitrine
Uh-huh.
replaces a pre-existing stone pier.
Right now.
Is there any,
Oh, right now, there's all glass, right.
Because I'm just asking, because it is
In
an
the middle.
individual landmark,
This is
maybe
going to blow
this
out.
front facade, the lower part of the facade should, if possible, be more representative of what there was. And I'm not sure, because we're seeing these boxes empty. And I think a part of the reason you can't really see or recognize that building normally is because it has so much
Signage and-
that is just hidden. And I know that this is discreet, but I'm just wondering if
I-
it wouldn't be better to not
Right.
have that way.
I tend to agree with you. I think that a good part of this proposal is restorative, and I think here's a real opportunity to restore the ground floor in a way which is actually with the materials that was initially, which was a part of the original type of material. And so the idea of putting glass, and even though it recalls it, I think my feeling is that probably masonry would be a more appropriate, and in fact the appropriate response. Because I think that in some ways, if you want to have this sort of modern interpretation, play with it at the top, but at your base of the structure of this building and the major facades, I think from that perspective should be retained in masonry.
Yeah, and I heard the argument about how, modern at the bottom, modern at the top,
Yeah, right.
restored in the middle. But I agree with you. I think I would prefer, restored up to that level, and you get your modern if you can restore from the bottom up, because the part of the building that people are going to, and this is a building that people are going to experience in every way, right? I mean, they're going to experience the middle, they're going to experience the bottom, they're going to experience the top. And I think it's and I realize in the presentation the fan glass was poo-pooed, but I kind of like the fan glass, and the fact that it still exists on the side I think is fantastic. So I will keep my feet firmly in the mud at the bottom with, masonry and fan glass, and keep my head in the stars with the dome.
All right. Other comments? Yes, Michael?
A minor comment. One of my issues before was the elimination of the slate roof.
Yes.
And I think the approach here has done well to maintain that system. What I would suggest, please, is to offer this horribly delaminated slate to the Historic House Trust for reuse on their buildings. It's the best-looking slate I've seen in New York City.
And I just want to add, I think it's a very stylish turtle shell, and I think ultimately it's a gift to the memory of the city of New York. Very nice job.
Right, and I think also retaining some of the medallions and finding a space for them, whether it's exterior or within the interior, I think also reinforces the history of this in multiple layers. Yes, other comments? Michael? Yes.
I couldn't agree more. I think that I personally am okay with the vitrines on the ground floor, because I think what makes the building so hard to read is the complete lack of order that the current signage regime imposes on this poor building. And this, even though it does not replicate it exactly, it does reinstate that kind of the classical order and design of the base in a way that allows for some signage. But if others feel otherwise, I'm okay with that. I think that there'd be no better building on which one could graft an addition than Tammany Hall. I think that, and I think that just the way that the thing has been done with the dome kind of morphing into a more abstract or modern image on the side is really fantastic, masterful. At the retention of the slate-esque roof they have their slate and they're eating into it too, so.
All right, other comments? Okay, I think that we understand that comment that you don't care, but I think that the commission overall would prefer to have the masonry, and I think you could work with staff on ensuring that the ground floor sort of, the material change will address that. And similarly, please take into consideration Commissioner Devonshire's recommendation of being able to use the slate. So if there are no other issues, then we can close the hearing. And Commissioner Moore, would you like to read that?
Be glad to. To the matter of 163899 4448 Union Square East, also known as 100-102 East 17th Street, Tammany Hall, individual landmark, Tammany Hall. Application is to construct a rooftop addition, install a new storefront, infill signage and window openings. I recommend approval, finding that the Neo-Georgian design of the building includes a pedimented portico with double-height pilasters at the Union Square East facade, and that this style of building often has rooftop features such as domes or other rooftop elements, and therefore a visible addition will not be inconsistent with this building type, that the current roofscape has many large visible additions, including the large tank room and mechanical equipment bulkheads, and that their demolition will not result in the loss of any significant architectural features of the building, that the present roofscape of ad hoc and irregularly shaped bulkheads and tank room detract from the Neo-Georgian design of the building, and replacing these features with a design domed addition that references the Neo-Georgian style in terms of its shape, placement, and proportional relationship to the facades will reinforce the style and typology of the building, that while the historic slate hipped roof was inspired by the large hip roof found at the original Federal Hall and other Neo-Georgian style civic buildings, it was built as a smaller secondary architectural element that is subservient to the entablature, pediment, and balustrade, and is not in keeping with the proportional system found in these other examples, and therefore its replacement will not detract from the architectural character of the building, that the proposed addition featuring a dome supported above a hipped roof will be consistent, the proportional system and monumentally of the roofs found at the other Georgian and Federal style institutional buildings from the 18th and 19th century, which the original design tried to emulate, that the designation report states that one of the interesting aspects of the building's design is the treatment of the facades to create the illusion of Georgian symmetry and balance, and the proposed treatment of the facade, that proposed addition will respect this illusion of symmetry found in the original design and expressed in the facades. That the sloped lower portion of the new rooftop addition will recall the historic slate hipped roof in terms of size and shape, and will maintain the same visual impact as the historic roof when seen from the west and south, that the terracotta sunshade tiles at the new hipped roof will recall the slate tiles in terms of color, pattern, and finish, but will incorporate spacing between the bands of tile to allow light into the new addition, resulting in a modern interpretation of the solid historic hipped roof, that the proposed dome addition will be in keeping with the building typology for which domes were a common feature, and that it will rise from behind the hipped roof, thus reducing its visibility from the north, south, and west, that the new brick mechanical penthouse will be located at the former location of the tank room, and while visible from Union Square, it will be seen against a background of larger secondary brick facades of nearby buildings, reducing its impact, that the visibility of the proposed addition will be limited from the east on East 17th Street and from the south, thus reducing its overall visual impact on the building, that an upturned arch leading from the dome will be located behind and will follow the general shape of the historic gable at the East 17th Street facade and will not overwhelm this significant architectural feature of the facade, that the proposed addition will only be visible in its entirety from Union Square West, and that while still visible from points within Union Square Park to the west, Park Avenue South to the north, and the west side of Union Square East to the south. The massing of the dome will sit behind a modern interpretation of the hip roof, thus allowing this modern addition to complement rather than detract from the significant architectural features of the building. And that light-colored metal and glass grid at the new rooftop addition will impart the design with a sense of lightness that will contrast with and enhance the masonry building below. And that the removal of the existing storefront infill awnings and signage at both facades will eliminate unsympathetic later alterations and will restore the building closer to its original appearance. That the new storefront infill consisting of steel frame display windows and doors set above a low stone base will be in keeping with modern storefront infill found at buildings of a similar age and style, and that the design will not detract from the significant architectural features of the building, that the proposed non-illuminated signage of the transom windows of the new infill will not detract from the significant architectural features of the building, that the new non-illuminated sign panels below the second floor will be limited to locations above new storefront infill on the two facades, will be located in areas that historically contain sign panels, and their installation will not result in damage to the facade, and their presence will not detract from the significant architectural features of the building, that the historic decorative transom window at the second floor balcony would fan light transoms of the East 17th Street facade and original wood double-hung windows throughout the facade are in a deteriorated condition that warrants their replacement, and that all new windows will match the historic windows in terms of configuration, operation, material, details, and finish. That the removal of the historic stone panels at the third floor of the 17th Street facade will allow for new window openings to create usable interior space, that these new window openings on the third floor of the 17th Street facade will follow the existing window fenestration pattern, and that the new windows will match the historic windows found at the second and third floors in terms of configuration, operation, material, details, and finish, that the reinstallation of two sound historic stone panels between the new windows at the third floor will preserve these significant architectural features which recall the original Federal Hall design, and that the third damaged panel will be restored and displayed at the interior, that the removal of the existing entrance canopy and second floor flagpole on the East 17th Street facade will eliminate unsympathetic later alterations at the building and will allow for the restoration of the central entrance and the ironwork at the second floor, that the expansion of the fourth easternmost opening at the ground floor of the East 17th Street facade will match the historic door opening at the fourth westernmost opening, thus resulting in a symmetrical treatment at the ground floor, that recessing the infill at this new opening will not detract from the significant architectural features of the building, and will allow for the installation of new intercom and security elements within the newly created JAM, that the new marquee at this new opening will be of simple modern design with rectilinear steel elements supported at the interior with a cantilever system, that a large portion of it will be set within the deeply recessed openings, and that it will not overwhelm or detract from any significant architectural and historic features of the building, that the expansion of the second easternmost window opening to allow for a new pair of doors will not require the removal of a significant amount of historic fabric, that the new width of the opening will align with the blind arch at the second floor above, and that the infill consisting of a pair of doors with a multi-light transom above will be in keeping with configuration of the historic infill, that the new blade sign adjacent to this entrance will be of a small scale, and its installation and presence will neither result in significant damage nor detract from the significant architectural features of the building, and that the new infill at the ground floor of the 17th Street facade consisting of bronze-framed paired doors and display windows will be in keeping with the historic entrance infill found at this facade and with the modern infill proposed at the front facade. However, the applicants We'll work with staff to modify the ground floor design facing Union Square to eliminate the vitrines and restore the missing masonry piers. Is that it?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, this application's been approved.